This is The Fit Mess with Zach and Jeremy.
Under smoke-filled skies and in the midst of a pandemic, this is The Fit Mess. Thanks so much for listening to the show. We appreciate you being there. We've got a great one for you this week, sort of following on the heels of an episode we did a couple of weeks ago talking about coaching, mentorship. We're going to get into how you can sort of look inward and find the guide within to help you find the answers to some of the biggest challenges that so many of us are facing right now. I know it's been a rough couple of days. For both for Zach and for myself. And so definitely a timely episode for everything that's been going on lately.
All right. So Jeremy, how you feeling?
You know, it's a little rough today. The timing of this show is perfect for me as usual. We have a fascinating conversation coming up in just a few minutes with our guest, Karen McGregor. She's the author of the Tao of Influence, but it's been a rough couple of days. I think it was Saturday that I was pretty depressed. And it followed, I live in Seattle and the entire state of Washington is covered in smoke right now. So it was bad enough that we couldn't go outside because we were all going to die from the coronavirus. But now we can't go outside, even in our own yards where we've set up things to get outside and enjoy our yard. Now we can't do that because we can't breathe the smoke. So we are literally like locked in our house because we can't breathe the toxic air. This followed a night where as the smoke was rolling in, I left my house for the first time in 5 days. And I tried to go buy an air filter to clean out, the air in my house and to keep us safe for a few days. And just the whole experience was a nightmare. I'm driving down the street. There are kids out riding their bikes, which normally would be a lovely thing, but they're not wearing any masks of any kind. They're just out there being exposed to these horrible toxins that are going to destroy their lungs. There's, I'm driving down the street. There's prostitutes walking up and down the street. Also, again, no masks. So being really unsafe on lots of levels. Every store I go to completely sold out of filters, despite what it says online, despite what they say on the phone. So that was sort of the trigger. That outing was the trigger that was like, the world is on fire and nobody's acting like anything's different.
Right.
And that just spiraled. I went to bed. I woke up just down. I just felt trapped in my house. I still can't go outside. It's this horrible feeling of, there's so much insecurity about the election that's going on. The air is toxic. There are viruses that are out to kill us all. It just feels like the world's burning and there's nothing I can do and there's no escape. I can't drive to the beach. I can't get away from it.
And you can't even change your air filter.
Well, luckily I have a neighbor that hooked us up. She had one that I borrowed, but
good.
But the tipping point was that I went, okay, there is suffering. There is chaos. There is tragedy. Time to turn inward. If I really need to escape, turn inward, find peace in the moment, find the opportunity that is here. And so I started meditating, trying to find peace in the moment. And all I found was the world is burning. I'm surrounded by ash. I'm not okay in this moment. Normally I can take any given moment and go, you're fine. You're sitting in a chair in a warm house. You have food. You have a job, you have steady income, things are going to be fine. But in that moment, the world was burning. There's a pandemic at my front door, and the future of the nation is up for grabs. So I couldn't find peace even in my refuge, my one place where I go when I need to find peace. I only found darkness and chaos.
Wow, that's pretty shitty, man.
Yeah, it's a bad Saturday. I don't recommend it.
You couldn't have done that on like a Wednesday and called in sick. That would have been a better approach.
It's a better use of my time, really, if we're being honest. So it was tough. I struggled, and I know you had kind of a rough Saturday yourself. We chatted about it a bit off mic.
Yeah, mine was a little bit different. I think mine was so I'm still doing these NAD supplements, IV drips.
Yeah,
and this was the day after I did a really big dose. Mm-hmm. 3 weeks after my initial doses, and it can have that impact on you to like kind of wipe you out. It was a really interesting feeling because I felt depression like I haven't felt in like 10 or 15 years.
Right. And you're normally the anxious one. I'm the depressed one. So you got a taste of what it's like in my mind for a little bit on Saturday.
Yeah. But all I wanted to do was I kept getting out of bed to go do something, mm-hmm. and like getting downstairs and going, well, this is all bullshit.
Yeah.
Like life
Yeah.
bullshit, and went
Yeah.
back upstairs and laid down. And it lasted a day, and the next day it was gone. But it was kind of weird. Like my anxiety had gone away, and my constant buzz, my constant motivation
Hmm.
that my anxiety provides was gone. And I laid in bed all day.
Yeah.
It was really weird.
Yeah. It's a dark place when all the drive and motivation that normally makes you function is just gone. When like literally you get up off the couch to like, you're just driven. Like, I just have to move my body, and you go in, like, my default, go to the kitchen. What is there to eat? And even there, you look in the cupboard, you look in the fridge, and you're like, none of this is even, what am I doing here? I'm going to go back to the couch. Like there's just nothing that motivates you to work toward anything positive when you're in that space. It's really difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I've had bouts of depression over the last 10 years, but nothing quite like that. It was a really, really good reminder as to why I've put in practice all of the things that I do to keep myself healthy, because it was a general feeling of hopelessness all day. And that's really scary because I'm not there generally.
Yeah. Yeah. The hopelessness that was it. Like when I came out of that meditation, I just was like, normally I can find enough calm to attach myself to some sort of hope. And I couldn't find it. And even now, we're a few days removed from that. There's always like this hangover. It takes a few days to shake it off. And so I'm sort of at the tail end of it, which is why I can function enough to record this, because my default would be, where's the darkest room I can be in with, and remove myself from being other people's problems. So that being said, I'm feeling much better now. Thanks for asking.
You're wearing a Snoopy t-shirt, so
yeah, but I've been wearing this for like 3 days, so it's not
right.
it's not as good as it seems.
No, so it's a good healing mechanism.
Yes. Plus the stench that I've created keeps everyone away from me, so I get myself some space. So many valuable tools that we have to offer here on this show. Get real stinky, and that keeps everyone away.
Or you just, when you're wearing your mask and you're out in public, you just cough.
Yes,
Just
that's
cough a few times. People just flee.
run. It's fantastic. But to the point of this discussion, there are a lot of things that you can do to fight off this kind of suffering. Clearly, I have not been implementing them strongly enough in recent days, which is why this is a terrific time to revisit this interview we did just a few days ago with author Karen McGregor. She is the author of the Tao of Influence. She has a fascinating story about basically just going from school teacher, battling depression, battling demons like the rest of us, to really finding her calling and becoming a voice for people like us who are trying to find our way on a more meaningful and more fulfilling journey.
Well, I think like many people, I started as a school teacher and really passionate and excited and whatnot. And, there's these soul callings, there's these urgings that we all get. And mine was very much a deep spiritual calling to still teach, but to do it in a different way, And I found myself going through a divorce. I found, it was very difficult parenting my children. And I realized that a lot of that came from a deeper longing for something I knew was missing. I knew there was something, but I didn't know what that was. And so I was looking, as many of us do, externally, even in this time of pandemic. We often look externally for the answers instead of looking internally to see what's going on. And so that journey started when my father passed away. And, like many of us, when we go through the loss of someone we love, we start to question more deeply what really matters. And so I came across the Tao Te Ching, which is a 4,000-year-old beautiful wisdom text that it's actually considered one of the wisest texts ever written. And it's just 81 short verses, but it really supported me in knowing, what is really important? What's the deeper path here that I need to look at? What am I missing? And so those answers started to fill in for me. And over time, I started my own business. I've had a business called Speaker Success Formula for 10 years. I really feel like I'm on the journey. I'm on my path. And I think a lot of the troubles that I had with my relationships, with my kids, with my marriage, much of that now has been what I call a flow, ease now. There's not so much struggle. There's not that drama and chaos anymore. And so with COVID being so much drama, so much chaos around the world, I think that, the book I've written is really a timely message for people to look deeply within and see how they can have that internal fulfillment and peace.
You mentioned looking outside for fulfillment. I've spent most of my life looking for a mentor, looking for somebody to show me the path, show me the way. And so often the ones that are the most effective are the ones that teach me to listen to myself. And that I find that when I can find moments of quiet, that inner voice often is the best guide and has better advice than anyone on the outside, because someone on the outside has their own biases and their own beliefs and their own experience. And so it's easy to dismiss even the best advice. But when it comes from inside, I find that that's the stuff that really puts me on the right path. Does that sound familiar? Is that similar to what your experience was?
Yeah, very much so. I was always in my head, and I always thought that I could solve any problem from my head because I considered myself to be smart. I laugh now, at the thought of that, because really the deepest wisdom is within. And so that was also a significant part of my book, was to have the courage to talk about inner guidance. In the world that I'm in teaching people to speak and to have a message on stage that really rocks the stage. It's very easy to go into the technical and go into what to do and not to do. But when I was writing my book, I really found that the deeper reasons for why people can express on stage, and this goes for all of us, the deeper reasons why we have the energy we have, why we can shift the world with what we offer, is not always the system and the how-to. It's also, are we listening to our deeper guidance? Because we could be really great at something and be miserable inside, or we could have, what seems like the perfect relationship, and yet we're suffering deeply inside because we're not listening to ourselves. So absolutely, I feel like what the two of you are doing is so important, because especially I think for men too, I feel like so many men have been taught not to listen to their deeper calling, to their deeper inner voice. And, and for whatever reason throughout history, it's been more acceptable for women to do that, but not for men. And so I find that this is a very special time during the pandemic where men are really going deep within. Like some of the greatest speakers that I'm friends with, they're known all around the world, and they're really starting to question themselves and what is it that I want, what is it that I really want? So I think it's absolutely critical, the inner guidance, to tune in and tap into that.
Wow. I'm just listening to you talk. It was making me reflect on the last 10 years of my life in the, I was raised to, be a man. I'm using big air quotes here. If I get a scratch, just get up and rub dirt on it. And that's not who I am. And I had to fight against that my whole life. And I'm really sensitive. I'm very sensitive and emotional. And it was in the last 10 years where I really started to realize I needed to embrace that side of myself and be vulnerable. talk about my feelings, talk about my emotions. And that's when the growth really started to happen for me. But it was never a switch. It wasn't a yesterday I was the image of what a man needs to be, and today I'm vulnerable. It was a process. It took a few years for me to get there. And I'm interested to hear your perspective on that switch for people, right? How do you go from, looking outward to all the things that are outside of your control to turning your eyes around and looking inside? It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. So I'm just curious what your perspective is on that, and how that you've seen that happen for people, and what the aha moment has been for some people.
Yes, thank you. Well, fortunately for me, it was a big wake-up call one day when I had an experience that was very powerful of the heart and of hearing guidance and also feeling it very, very powerfully. But for a lot of people who don't have that experience, they often question, is what I'm hearing inside real? Is what I'm hearing inside the real me? Is it just made up? And so I think that, Zach, one of the things we have to come to terms with is, do we believe strongly enough that we are being guided? Do we really believe that? And I think that's where it all starts, is a really firm desire to integrate that belief daily into our daily life. A lot of I know A Course in Miracles. It's another wisdom text. They often say, to get up in the morning and ask yourself, or ask, for guidance, and just ask the question, what would you have me do today? What would you have me say today? And I think that's a beautiful question to ask, because if you do it every day, it's almost as if you're giving up all of your self-proclaimed efforts to do this and that, and just really focused on, I believe at every moment in time I'm being supported and guided here. So let me take a few minutes every morning just to really focus on that. So that's one thing for sure. The other thing, and I write about this a lot in my book, is how we become very attached to certain patterns and ways of being that create particular thoughts. And of course, as both of you know, because you've studied this so much, is when we're young and we want to have our needs met. Basically, this is a very short version of what I talk about in the book, but we want to have our needs met. And when we don't have those needs met, we make up that there's something wrong with us. Mm-hmm. And each of us, based on our scenario at home and what we make that mean, try to continue to get our needs met in from then on in unhealthy ways. Mm-hmm. So as an example, somebody might decide, you know what, my home is so unstable and so chaotic that I, from now on, am going to control every aspect of my life.
You're so in my head right now. I it's one of those things I know better, but it is a thing that I deal with constantly with 2 little kids and a wife and dogs and all the things. It's that, like, I want things this way. However, that is impossible given this situation. And it's incredible, but the more that I can step back and let go and just allow, and it's not like being passive and like not having a voice, not having a place for yourself in the family, but figuring out kind of how you can help steer the boat down the river rather than trying to steer it up the river. That sense of letting go really creates so much more peace whenever I can have the clarity to acknowledge it.
Yeah, and what I talk about is the power patterns, Jeremy, that we get into. One is very clear for me as well. I'm very much, I can take control and just tell everybody what to do. and how to do it quite easily. But the key is once you identify your patterns, it's very easy from then on to catch yourself the minute that you think it or say it. But if we never identify it, it's so much harder to go about our day being conscious of how we're showing up in the world. And so another example is withdrawing. So people who withdraw, they might be called shy when they're younger. But quite often, those are, as Zach was saying earlier, those are our sensitive children who quite often in their youth, there's something that happens that causes them to say, I prefer not to engage in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And quite often it is because they're sensitive, and they it's just for them in that moment the best decision they can make. And so that decision continues on in their life, where, as an example, they might have something very important to contribute, but they'll stand back. Or they might have, there might be a networking situation, or they're in a boardroom where they have probably the best ideas. They might be the brightest person in the room, and they're not going to say anything. So these are all things that we all have to be aware of, that we have created as a result of that original wound. Mm-hmm. And so what I just say is, watch your thoughts and allow them to release. As you said, Jeremy, release, release, release.
Yeah.
But you have to practice that, and you have to identify. So it's easier for me now to identify myself. Oh, there's the controller starting up again. Okay, can I just breathe here and allow that thought or whatever I said, just let it go, and not to hang on to it and get further, triggered by the situation.
Definitely.
That's so interesting how you put that. I was having some of the conversations with my wife, who I met when I was 23, I think. And she was the first person who ever really encouraged me to say my ideas out loud. Up until then, I would hold them back, thinking that it was going to be dumb or they would be judged inappropriately. And amazingly enough, she encouraged me to say my ideas out loud. And I started to get promotions at work, and they paid me more. And I just remember coming home all the time going, can you believe this? They're paying me more money. Something's not right here. Like this just isn't, this isn't happening the way it should be happening. If they knew the truth, they wouldn't be doing this. But then it escalated, and I got a little cocky, I think. And the ego came in 10 years later, and I actually had to check myself and keep some of my opinions to myself and keep that voice down a little bit.
Well, it's wonderful to go from one extreme to another to find our balance. That's what the Tao is all about, is, how do we find that beautiful flow and balance where our ego is not rearing its ugly head, but it's actually, we're just in the flow of our gifts, really, on the planet.
Well, let's talk about your book, and particularly in the times we live in. These are powerful lessons that a lot of folks can apply to sort of find some of that peace and start letting go and sort of allowing, because when it comes to a pandemic, there's not a whole lot that most of us can do about it other than the simple tips that we're given to stay safe, but there's not a lot that we can do to correct it. I don't have the ability to solve COVID, right? So I've got to wear my mask. I've got to wash my hands. But there's some deeper work that we can do, and I think your book can help with that. So tell us a little bit about the book and sort of why it's important in this current time.
Sure. Well, it's called the Tao of Influence for a reason, and we talked about some of the Taoist principles and the wisdom behind that. But what I do is I merge it with the idea that if we follow those principles, if we are aware, if we come back into balance, and I actually show people how to do that, then we can influence the world. Because I think a lot of books that have been written about influence are about trying to get something from someone.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very different book. It's not about trying to get something from someone. It's really about, can we, who desire to create positive change on the planet, become the person that is able to do that? And yes, there's all sorts of systems and all sorts of steps you can take to do that. But as both of you say, which I absolutely love, that inner world and that inner work is the most important step, and most people miss it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the 4 pillars that I write about in the book is, first of all, how are you navigating your power, and really understanding that all pure power comes from love, all distorted power is fear. And so how do we get back to that? So I'm very practical in that explanation of, understanding it, but also how do we get back to it? The second is presence. And I think both of you are such beautiful examples of how we can come back to being fully present, because honestly, I think the world is deeply lacking presence right now. We are so concerned about the future, as we should be, but we're not living here right now with our neighbors, with our community, with our family, and being really in this moment. Because really, one of my mentors said, everyone thinks forever is a long time, but forever has nothing to do with time. It's actually being present to the moment, which isn't time-based.
Right.
And so that's important. And then I also talk about purpose, like we were talking about in the beginning of this call. How do we get back into our purpose? Not just our individual purpose, but helping other people. Like if we see that someone is just suffering because they're not doing that thing that they're meant to do on this earth, to actually support them, to help them. I think so many corporations, we have the wrong people in doing the wrong things, and they are suffering from a very deep place. So that's another thing. And then the last is potential. And I have a very soft spot in my heart for a different way of looking at potential. I always say that the greatest potential comes from our deepest soul's calling to manifest that. It's not so much potential from, let's get as much done as possible here. And I went to Italy. I was blessed to go to Italy last summer. And I remember, Jeremy and Zach, I remember thinking when I saw the David, Michelangelo's The David, I remember thinking, if we could all be creating things from that place of undying passion for something. He worked on that statue for 3 years, nonstop, day and night, with no money, no food, just carving this beautiful statue. And so I'm not suggesting that we go hungry, but I am suggesting that we've lost our deeper passion that creates beautiful things in the world, So anyway, so those are the 4 pillars. And I highly suggest, if people are looking at being change makers, that they start to develop themselves in those 4 areas. And that's really what my book is all about.
I think the thing I love about your story is that you were a school teacher and you found this path, and you're doing this now. You listened to yourself and you found this other path. I know for me, if I'm having a conversation with me 10 years ago, I don't recognize this guy. And this guy seems impossible to become. It sounds like this just laundry list of, you got to eat this and work this hard and chain and sit and meditate, and just this list that's ridiculous when you write it down. But they all happened step by step. It wasn't something that I took on as a to-do list. It was, oh, that sounds interesting, I'll try that. So for someone who is trying to find their purpose, trying to find their potential, they don't know where to begin because they're feeding the kids and getting them off to now digital school and just swamped.
Yes.
How do you make that shift? How do you find the time to listen to yourself? And how do you trust that voice? Because I've battled depression my entire life too, and both voices can get real loud. There's one that says that I'm just a worthless sack, and the other that says there's nothing I can't do, and they love to fight. And it's really hard to choose which one is the right voice sometimes. How do people start to find that purpose, that potential, and how do they trust the voice that's guiding them to make their decisions?
Absolutely. So before I get into this, for anyone who wants to take this further, my website, KarenMcGregor.com, is MCGREGOR, KarenMcGregor.com. They can read about it, lots of free resources. I have a YouTube channel, all of that. But the short version for what you said is, can you make a space within your day, whether that means getting up early or staying up late, even an extra 30 minutes, is really, really vital because, back in my grandma's day, people made time to go for walks. They made time to garden. And those were the activities, those simple activities that actually allowed them to reflect and to be in their own sacred space, which we have lost, And so I think, again, it's a passionate desire for that commitment, because we can all say, well, that sounds like a good idea, but until you feel the desire strongly enough, it probably won't happen. So, if anyone's listening today and thinking, oh, I've had enough, I need that space, that could be one way. Another way is, are there times in which you could do it where you are in between things,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe waiting in line somewhere instead of reading your texts? Can you just go silent, go within yourself? It doesn't have to be a really long time. The other thing is around the voices in your head, because everybody I know, Jeremy, has been talking about the two voices right now.
Yep.
It's just so common. So I would love to address this by saying, don't believe either voice. This is very unusual, but I'm going to say this because if you believe one voice and say, yeah, I only am going to think positive thoughts from now on, then your other side will rear its ugly head and really start to compete with the one. So if you look at all thoughts as outside of you, as not part of you, but simply a thought, it doesn't identify you, it doesn't make you a good person or a bad person or a lazy person or a productive person or a successful person or unsuccessful, is simply a thought. And I know for me, this has been the most helpful because the more famous I got, the more money I had in my bank account, it was all an identifier for me. Oh, I'm this now. Mm-hmm. Oh, people see me as this now. And honest to goodness, I think my next book will be about identity because it's such a powerful driver for so many people. That's why they're miserable during COVID, because they're saying to themselves, I don't know what my identity is anymore. Well, what if we could just let go of both sides and not feed either identity?
That is so interesting because so much, it is different from what I hear a lot, because so often people will say the negative voices, the ones that tell you how horrible you are, that's all coming from a place of fear, but the ones that are positive are from a place of love. And even hearing you describe it, that makes perfect sense, because so much of what set me on the right path has been more of a feeling than a thought. It's been this just knowing, for lack of a better word, like just knowing that's the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. That's the next step I'm supposed to take. That's the person I'm supposed to talk to about this. And so you're right. It is. And because I tell my kids this all the time, to let their thoughts go and not hang on to them. and to really lead with their heart and to feel, and that will set them on the right path. So it's interesting to hear that, because so often people try to just dismiss the negative and just say, oh, just focus on the positive, because that's the truth, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I remember on my 52nd birthday, just a few months ago, everybody had something kind to say about me, and they all wanted to share, which was beautiful.
Right.
And it really was, but it left me feeling really empty at the end of the night. And I thought, what is going on? Why can't I feel happy and joyful and, receive the appreciation? And what I realized from a deeper level was, wow, that all fed my ego. And in the past, it would have been just another form of adding to my positive identity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's wonderful to get those. I'm not suggesting that we don't give them. I think praise is super important, and it goes a long way, but it also can get us stuck on a perceived identity, which I'm not sure is always helpful. It is sometimes,
right? But
sometimes it can get us into trouble as well.
Definitely.
I'm really glad that you said all that. About probably 6 years ago, my identity was completely wrapped up in what I did for work. And I was my job. I was very good at it. And I got compliments all the time how good I was at it. And I decided to make a change. I took a risk and took a different job that was not the same job. And my identity disappeared overnight.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most depressing and toughest times I've ever gone through, because who I was gone, just overnight, gone. And I had to, this was when I took up yoga and went and became a yoga teacher. And I started exploring all these other things and looking inside. And that was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, was to get rid of my identity overnight, because then I had to go find myself. Yeah. And it was a tough journey at first, but it was a wonderful journey. And I can't imagine being in that spot where maybe my identity would go away overnight again, and COVID is happening at the same time. That would be incredibly difficult. So thank you for saying that. If your next book is going to be about identity, I will buy a copy before it ever comes out.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. I think it's just so vital for all of us right now. We are going through transition, whether it is a career transition or a relationship transition, or just coping with, the social transition and the different ways of connecting. Everything is so different. So I do believe identity is a big, big part of, where we're shaken up. And so I hope, that these concepts that we've talked about today, that people can just think about them, but also be assured, that we're all in this boat together. And that if we use some of these concepts on a daily basis that we've been talking about today, that they can actually come through with fulfillment and grace and joy.
All right, that was Karen McGregor. She is the author of The Tao of Influence. You can get a copy of that book by visiting our website, thefitmess.com. And also quickly want to mention this episode brought to you by the Athletic Brewing Company. I happen to be, they released this, the Cerveza, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, Atletica, which I've been very curious about, because to make a lighter flavor beer, like a Corona style beer as a non-alcoholic one, that seems like a challenge to me. That seems very difficult to do. And I've got to say, they nailed it. I don't know how they do it. These guys are magicians with a non-alcoholic beer. This stuff is amazing. So thank you to the Athletic Brewing Company for sponsoring us. Again, more information about them and links to buy their beers on our website, thefitmess.com. So thank you to them. Speaking of athletic, You mentioned we were talking moments ago before we started recording the show about how you actually got in a workout today. You haven't been doing that for a while.
I got a workout in today and one yesterday. I did a light one yesterday to test my ankle because I did something nasty to it. I don't think I sprained it, but it might have been a light sprain, right?
Okay.
But I couldn't do anything with my ankle, and like I couldn't jump, I couldn't walk. I was on vacation, limping all over the place. Like I'm the guy who walks everywhere on vacation. I couldn't go, 100 yards without sitting down. It was pretty painful. So I was on vacation, so I'm not going to work out on vacation.
Of course.
But, but I'd gone a week because my ankle got hurt. And then I was on vacation, and then we were back for a week and my ankle was still going. So I did a light Shanti workout yesterday. Actually, I did Insanity Max 30, but I did the modifier.
Okay.
Which is really tough because I did try and jump a few times.
That's brutal, man.
But I did that and it was okay.
Uh-huh.
So, and then I checked what the CrossFit schedule was for today, and it's bring a friend week.
Okay.
So they don't want, the goal is to get new customers, right? So don't put out these crushing workouts. So it was a kind of a lighter workout,
Sure.
which was really good.
And was that
I did make it back
in person in the gym?
Yeah. So gyms are open here now.
Right.
My gym has been open for a couple of months now, but they set up a whole rig in the parking lot and you're like 10 feet away from everyone. But today was actually interesting because the coach challenged everyone to do the workout with your mask on.
Oh, wow.
Which was, there was a couple of moments where like if I was breathing in through my nose, my mask actually clogged my nostrils.
Oh, no. That's funny.
But if I just breathe through my mouth, I'm a mouth breather anyway. So
of course, yeah.
Drag my knuckles and all too. I could breathe just fine in a mask while I was working out. It was a little warm, but it was okay.
That's the thing.
Has been super helpful for me.
That's the thing about the mask is that it really doesn't limit your oxygen. Like it's almost immeasurable, the amount of oxygen that it limits. It's just that warm air that feels horrible. I'm with everyone that hates it. Don't get me wrong. It sucks, but it's really just because it's warm. That's the problem that everyone has with it.
Yeah. But by around the 45th sit up though, I totally forgot about the mask.
Oh, interesting.
It was the least of my concerns.
That's funny. So speaking of working out, that I know is something that has been really weighing me down lately because I broke my toe. We talked about that a little bit on the last show. So my foot is wrecked. Can't really do much with it. And then I'm walking funny, which is causing like my hips to compensate. So then I'm sore. I got this rib that slipped out of place that I've been trying to knock back into place. That hurts like hell. I mean, I'm just a mess, and I need to be moving my body to get this energy out, but also to strengthen my body to make these stupid things stop getting in the way. So I keep trying to imagine like, oh, maybe I could do like a seated yoga thing. Maybe I could do something really simple. But this is the dumbest injuries happened to me. I sat on a chair that didn't have very good padding for like the first few weeks of this current office configuration that I have. And because of that, I managed to injure my tailbone. So even sitting down hurts. So I can't even do like a seated yoga. This is bullshit. I'm suffering in pain, and I can't use any of the tools that I usually use to get myself out of it.
You are a literal fit mess.
I'm literally a fit mess right now. Perfect name.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Now we both kind of are, because again, my ankle is still a little wobbly.
Yeah.
Because of that, same thing as you. Like I was walking in a weird way and compensating with my other leg and caused my other foot to hurt. Yeah. My hip hurt, my knee hurt. It's just
ridiculous.
On top of the fact that we are getting old.
Yeah, well, there's that. Yeah. Speaking of yoga, we're running out of time. We should mention quickly, last week you challenged yourself to make sure you got into more yoga. How'd that work out for you?
Really good. I mean, that's my meditation. That's my happy place. And on top of the fact that my whole body is really just got, 40 plus years of gunk built up to the point where my shoulders and hips and knees and everything doesn't move quite as much as a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't do yoga, it gets even worse. And then I go try and put a barbell over my head. And I'm like, why isn't my arm moving the way it's supposed to? Oh, the barbell's coming down on my head. Oh, shit.
And then you got a whole new injury to slow you down.
Yeah. But no, I've been doing really well. Again, it's my happy place. It's where I need to go. It is my meditation. But you were going to focus on your meditation as well.
Yes, I was going to, and I did. I've been trying to get in at least a couple of minutes. Like if the day is just so packed, I'll try and just find moments, even if I'm just washing the dishes, to really just be in the moment and wash that dish, like really just give it my full attention. So I got in several sessions like that. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I spent some dedicated time on Saturday, and it's the first time that it hasn't gotten me out of whatever I was trying to get myself out of. So it was a big reality check, and just shows that I still have a lot to learn about meditation. And every time I think I've sort of got it, it's one of those things where you've never got it. It's a lifelong pursuit. So one definitely worth pursuing and worth trying to do, because it does make a big difference most of the time.
60% of the time, it works every time.
That's right. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, or something, however that expression goes. And so with that, we're going to get out of here. We want to quickly mention it is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. That is why we're focusing so much on sort of the spiritual, the mental health, the emotional health stuff for the next few interviews that we have lined up. If you are someone that's struggling and you do need help, there are tons of resources. We'll put links up on our website if you find yourself needing that help that you can't get from your built-in support network if you have one. So you can find that there, and you can find links to our show where you can subscribe and sign up for our newsletter and follow us on all the various social media channels. That's all available at our website, where we'll also have a brand new episode in about a week at thefitmess.com. Thanks so much for listening.
See you, everyone.
We know this podcast is amazing and does not seem to lack anything, but we do need a legal disclaimer. Jeremy and Zach are not doctors. They do not play them on the internet, and even if they did play them on the internet, they would be really bad at it. Please consult your physician prior to implementing any changes that you heard on this podcast. The listener assumes that Jeremy and Zach do not know what they are talking about, and that you will do your own research on the topics talked about on this podcast.